Dalton Smith versus Jose Zepeda, 12 rounds in the 140-pound division. This one is taking place over in the UK. It should be a good one. Let's get into it. Let's start with Dalton Smith. 15 wins, no losses, 11 wins by way of knockout. We're going to learn a lot about Dalton Smith in this fight, right? Like, what's next for him if he gets past Zepeda. As we know, he's fought for a title a couple times and came up short. But the thing with Zepeda is he always fought hard, always fought those fights very, very tough. So on paper, this is going to be his toughest test yet. We'll see if that proves to be true on the night. I think Smith is a talent, man. I think he's got a bunch of upside, a lot of potential. Obviously, he can punch. We know he's athletic. He's explosive. He's got good timing, and I like his shot selection. I thought against his last opponent, Sam Maxwell, his most recent opponent, he put together everything on that night to me, right? He was patient, but not too patient. He can fight on the inside. He can fight on the outside, but he's more of a guy that likes to fight on the outside with a little bit of separation where he can maneuver, move forward and step back as he sees fit. He can fight on the front foot. He can fight on the back foot. He's a good counter puncher, right? When he needs to be. I think he's got a pretty good chin, but we're going to see in this fight. Against Maxwell, he did get caught with a nice short check right hook that Maxwell landed, that landed clean on Smith's chin, and he took it well. Didn't really seem too phased. But I think Zepeda is a bigger puncher than Maxwell, so we'll see when a shot connects if he's able to take that and come forward and still not lose confidence or doubt himself. What I liked about his fight in Maxwell, other than his actual performance, was the fact that when he suffered the cut underneath his eye, sometimes when a fighter gets a little bit more added adversity, a cut or something of that nature, it makes them retreat, right? And they're so worried about the cut that they aren't worried about their opponent. But for him, it seemed like it made him that much more uber focused and dialed in. And he really started to take over the fight and really started to separate himself even more. Now, early on in the fight, Smith caught Maxwell with a beautifully timed uppercut that landed, right, when Maxwell was reaching too much forward on the front foot, and he got clipped. It did a little bit of damage, but not devastating damage. In the 6th round, Maxwell got caught with the same thing. He made the same mistake. He was reaching and lunging forward, and Smith caught him with the same shot with a little bit more power behind him, and that shot hurt Maxwell. But it was interesting because it shows the IQ of Smith. He was reaching too much in the early part of the fight, and when he made the same mistake again, he put it in his head and was just like, man, it's gonna come again, and he made it happen and capitalized off it when Maxwell made the same mistake. So the IQ is there. He's thinking, he's able to process what is happening in the fight. Then in the 7th round, he was able to close out the show with a beautiful sequence, feint with the left hand to get him to bite with the show hand and come through with the real hand, and he closed out the show with the right hand shot over the top. But again, it was a really good performance. It was a great performance. You know, it was a much better showing than his performance against Ellington and a much better performance than his fight against Benjamin. Not that those fights were terrible fights, but it just seemed like to me he was comfortable with doing what he needed to do to get the win and not really doing anything to really separate himself. I feel like against Ellington and Benjamin, he could have done more in imposing his talent and skill. And I think sometimes he doesn't truly commit to what he wants to do, whether it's him being more of a counter puncher or him being more on the front foot. He just seems a little bit hesitant to me at times from my viewpoint. Again, I'd like to see him let his hands go a little bit more earlier in this fight because he does put together nice combinations. He's got nice hand speed, quick hand speed, and he's got good pop in his shots. And I think if he can push the pace a little bit earlier and get Zepeda uncomfortable and not allow him to really get into his flow, man, I think he can really start to separate and impose himself very early on in the fight. But again, I think Smith has a lot of upside, a lot of potential, and we'll see if he is who he thinks he is on the night. We'll see how he fares against Zepeda. Let's talk about Zepeda. 37 wins, 4 losses, 28 wins by way of knockout. I'm very curious to see which version of Zepeda we are going to get. Remember when he fought Ivan Baranchyk, how exciting that fight was, the back and forth fight, both men landing shots against each other, both men hitting the canvas a couple times. And that fight was great because it had drama, it had high action, it had heavy punches, it had everything that you would want in an exciting fight. And the determination of both of these men was the thing that really kept them up and helped them get back up. Zepeda closed that out with a knockout of the year. Remember, Baranchyuk's leg was like stuck and he was like draped over like this, like how he landed on the canvas. It looked crazy, but it was a great performance from Zepeda, right? Only sad part about that was that, it was during the pandemic times when there was no one in the crowd. It would have been crazy if there were people there. The atmosphere would have been electrifying, but nonetheless. So that was that version of Zepeda. Are we going to get the Zepeda that fought Hank Lundy after? And even though he got the unanimous decision victory, it was a very underwhelming performance from Zepeda. It wasn't an excellent performance. It was an okay performance, but to me, he should have dominated Hank Lundy, in my opinion. And I don't think he did that, even though he did get the win. I personally think it's possible to get a unanimous decision victory and not dominate the fight, if you know what I'm saying. Are we going to get the version of Zepeda that fought Jose Vargas, right? Who stopped Vargas in the first round, right? Are we going to get the Zepeda that fought Regis Prograis and left everything inside of the ring and made good adjustments in real time, turned momentum in his favor in some rounds, pushed the pace in some rounds, counterpunch effectively in some rounds, and had Prograis hurt in the 10th round? And even though he lost that fight, I personally think it was one of his best performances. Are we going to get that version of Zepeda? Or are we going to get the most recent version of Zepeda that fought Richardson Hitchens? And if it's that version, man, he didn't look good at all, right? He got outboxed. He got outclassed. He couldn't get anything going for himself, right? He couldn't keep up with the speed of Hitchens. He couldn't cut off the ring to slow him up. He was reaching with his punches, lunging forward with his jabs. If Hitchens focused more offensively and really wanted to turn it up, I think there's a good chance he probably could have got some type of stoppage against Zepeda because Zepeda was too easy to get hit. And the thing with Hitchens, man, that makes him so dangerous, he's so fundamentally sound. And he's very disciplined. He's got a great jab, great hand speed, good counterpuncher. And Zepeda couldn't really do enough, put enough pressure on Hitchens to disrupt his flow and make it uncomfortable for him by no means. And every time he made a mistake, Hitchens made him pay every single time with jabs, with quick counters. So with that being said, though, Hitchens is a dark horse, man. I think he's one of the best 140-pound fighters in the division that may not get a lot of recognition for his skill set and what he can do. But that version of Zepeda, it was night and day that he's not that same guy as he once was. Obviously, we'll see what happens on the night and which version that we do get. We can only base things off what we saw most recently, and the most recent version of Jose Zepeda wasn't really a good version of him. But again, things could change on the night. I think Zepeda is a solid fighter, a world-class fighter. He was once atop of the division. Tough to beat, but now I think he's even more beatable, especially coming off of a loss and how he lost his last fight. So who wins? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is Dalton Smith's first fight against a southpaw, and that could be troublesome for him if he's not careful. At this stage, Smith is more explosive. I think he's more dynamic. I think he's the sharper fighter to me. Zepeda is the more experienced fighter, and that will work in his favor. He's still got good pop in his shots. And I think it's just which version of Zepeda are we going to get, right? Which version is going to show up? Can he beat Dalton Smith? Absolutely, he can beat Dalton Smith. He's got the skill and the experience, but coming off of a loss, coming off of an uninspiring loss and performance against Hitchens, fighting on Smith's home soil, I think he needs to stop Dalton Smith if he wants to come out with the victory. I'm not sure if we see that in play in this fight. I'm more confident in Dalton Smith by decision in this fight. I think Dalton Smith's coming in with a lot of confidence, a lot of belief. I think he's determined. I think he knows what's at stake here. And I think he's got the skill and the talent to get the win against Zepeda. So I like Dalton Smith to win this fight by decision. I just think the momentum is right. I think the timing is right. I think the confidence is right. I think he's the more explosive man. I think he's the more determined man. But I'm not counting out Zepeda by no means. But I think momentum-wise is moving more in Dalton Smith's favor than it is in Jose Zepeda. I like Smith to win this fight by decision. What are your thoughts on this fight? Who do you have winning this one? Let me know in the comment section below. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a couple ways that you can do so. You can like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like support by way of donation, you can find options in the description below. Also, my Cash App handle will be on screen as well. Any amount goes towards the growth of this channel. It'll be greatly, greatly appreciated. Shout out to everybody that continues to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, man. I appreciate each of you. So with all that being said, if you've been watching the video, this time do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, and we'll definitely see you next time.